These guys, they're probably about 12 years old. Gaming is just always so childish and negative. Or is it? Since their creation, video games have always been a topic mired in controversy and skepticism. Even today, despite much of the progress it's made in the last decade. Examples of these controversies are many. But to name a few, examples are that they are unproductive, unhealthy, and in extreme cases, that they can incite individuals to commit acts of violence. Even as a lifelong gamer myself, I've had to keep many of these controversies in the back of my mind, particularly those that claim health concerns. One day, however, I was talking to my girlfriend about how fast she was learning to drive, a skill she previously never had before. And she said something that made me change my stance forever, that her fast learning was due, in part, to her time spent playing video games. You see, she comes from South Korea, a country far more accepting of video games than Western culture is. And while they're not the only factor, they do seem to play quite a role in their education. As you can see with this chart, where 55% of students who achieve an A also play video games, with most of those playing less than 1 hour per day. This shifted my thought process from, instead of thinking about how video games are actively trying to ruin our lives, to how they might actually better them. So it turns out they actually do offer a lot of benefits and could be better incorporated into our lives. As I began to study this topic, I couldn't stop. The research is truly fascinating. One such study, conducted by Frontiers in Human Neuroscience, claims that video games have a massive impact on our own brain's development. The study suggests that people who play video games have a wide variety of improvements in a wide variety of skills, such as attention prioritization, multitasking, spatial awareness, and skill acquisition. Some of these make quite a bit of sense when you consider the environment that gaming frequents us in, one that is extremely fast-paced. With most games, this environment requires us to make decisions in an instant. Those decisions being informed by the many elements on screen, all attempting to convey different kinds of information. Examples of these elements would be like a health bar, points scored, to the more complex, like how many seconds until you can use an ability. It's unsurprising then that individuals who frequent this environment tend to have better attention prioritization skills, being able to focus their attention on what demands it the most, while putting the less important things into the peripheral. This is also a primary contributor to better spatial awareness, as in addition to having 8 or 9 elements in your peripheral at any given time, you also have to be aware of what's off the screen too, like the enemies that just spawn in behind you, or the power-up that you walk past that you intend to backtrack for. And as touched on, with being constantly aware of your environment, having 8 or 9 things in your peripheral, and remembering the route you took to get through a level, all contribute very heavily to multitasking as well. But what makes it interesting is just how far gaming pushes our multitasking ability to its limits. A simple example of this would be any game that increases its difficulty by adding more enemies onto the screen. Each one of those is now a new element that you have to appropriately prioritize. And they each have their own health bars, behaviors of their own, and in some cases, something unique with them, like a weak spot. But we don't consider, say, 3 more enemies on screen to be much of a challenge in games. And that's actually because our multitasking ability has improved. And touching on improvement as well, is skill acquisition. Games have a very set formula of encouraging us to set a goal to surpass, rewarding us when we start making progress towards that goal, and then giving us an ultimate reward once we have finally surpassed it. This is actually very similar to how the brain naturally rewards skill acquisition, giving us minor reward for every step we make towards mastery, and giving us an ultimate feeling of satisfaction and accomplishment once we finally do master that skill. So that's something you can tell somebody the next time they say you're wasting time playing games. You're actually just working on improving your skills in just a really roundabout way. So, and finally, as noted in Dr. Daphne Bevillaire's own TED Talk, Your Brain on Video Games, the benefits are not limited to just mental ability either. It can also be physical. Despite what many of you might believe, there is actually improvements to eyesight through video games. Admittedly, this ties into the spatial awareness bit. It's mostly due to people who play video games being very used to paying attention to minute details or patterns that others might just disregard. But this can be the difference between noticing the light of a deer on the side of the road and missing it altogether. And that's just to name one real-life application of such a thing. As you can see, there are many benefits that video games lend us. And there's equally as many ways that we can incorporate them into our daily lives. Dr. Bavilaire suggests that they can be incorporated into education, helping students to better understand and remember content in a visual style. The attention prioritization alone lends heavily to this, as this helps cover one of the frustrations that many teachers have faced over the years, getting students to pay attention in class. There's been shown through numerous studies that reviewing a lesson through something like Jeopardy or Bingo helps retain student attention far better and also helps them recall facts during a test. Games aim to do much of the same, but with the flexibility of being different kinds of games or presenting problems in a way that encourages you to keep trying until you succeed. And as noted in Adam Eichenbaum et al.'s journal, Video Games, Play That Can Do Some Serious Good, he notes that video games also have a very unique ability to them, to get people to want to commit hours into them without feeling like much of an investment. And he hopes that this is something that we can translate, perhaps, into education. Although, as noted by Dr. Bavilaire, we're still a ways off from this, because it turns out making a game that is educational, but also not dull and unappealing to the students is a challenge in and of itself. So we're working towards that. And then another real-life application for video games is actually in assisting the elderly as well. Because as noted in Eichenbaum's journal, video games give help with vision and attention. This helps effectively combat many of the issues faced by elderly people, particularly if those people are playing real-time strategy games, or RTS for short, which have been shown to help people with working memory and abstract conceptualization. So, so obviously, many of these benefits are nothing short of incredible, and they have an amazing ability to impact the way we live our lives. But why should you care? After all, I don't think many of you are teachers or elderly. Well, I'm sure that none of us have ever found ourselves in a situation where we've been presented with massive amounts of information that we're expected to remember and recite in a short amount of time, right? No? Sure? So, video games are these developments are pretty appealing to students, particularly those in college, especially with studying and test taking. Attention prioritization and multitasking alone play a huge role in this. Attention prioritization helps students to better be able to filter out distractions while doing an assignment, while also being able to prioritize what assignment might demand their attention the most in that particular moment and what can be saved for later. The rest of it falls down to multitasking. And multitasking will help people with being able to rapidly switch between tasks without feeling stressed or overwhelmed, and also helps with being able to do, obviously, two things at once. Like, for instance, writing an essay and maybe getting your research done at the same time. And the other one is more of a marginal improvement, but it is with skill acquisition. Naturally, when we tend to take a class or study, it is essentially an exercise in skill acquisition, just around the subject that you happen to be studying at that time. As noted, this one's a marginal improvement, so ultimately good study habits are gonna make or break this one. But if you do play video games, you will notice that you're learning content just a little bit faster than maybe some of your peers. So, as you can see, there's many benefits for video games within our society. But as with anything, they're best done in moderation. So what does moderation look like? Do I have to spend 40 hours to get this to work? So actually, the benefits I listed above can actually be observed in individuals who have only play games for 1 or 2 hours per week. Anything more than that, and you actually start to enter into the negative effects more, particularly with exercise and hygiene. Surprisingly. But what I'm saying is that you don't need to play video games like it's a job. You don't need to play 40 hours a week and become the best in your region. Just picking up a game 10 minutes before you write a paper will show you the exact same results. Hopefully with this, the next time you look to study, you might look to pick up the game before you pick up the book. Or at the very least, consider the broader scope that gaming has to offer.